Hello everyone, my name is Gina Willis. I'm here to present the Operations Change Control Process Improvement Project. The agenda of this presentation is to do a project objective review, a problem review, root cause review, our proposed solution, implementation plan, our effectiveness check, and next steps. The objective of this project is a business process improvement to eliminate the production downtime that's occurring as a result of user inputs or systematic errors when they're executing work center operations. The scope of this project is focused on cross-functional root cause analysis, process and user evaluations, implementation and measurement of the proposed plan that we have for this project. The problem we're trying to address is that there are recurring monthly delays in production. There's increased annual costs of a run rate of $577,000 that we will be looking at having through end of 2017. This equates to about 4,422 units that are lost that we are not able to recoup. This also requires us to incur additional overtime cost and variable cost around reworks, packaging, and other materials that are used for these products. The challenge that we have is that this sometimes creates a 3-week additional lead time on products as well, because devices will literally go on hold and wait for procedures to be evaluated, reviewed, or for corrections to occur in the system so that operators can continue producing product. So what we looked at as a root cause for this problem is we surveyed all of the users that have a direct impact to the process today, specifically production workers. We also looked at the process and watched them perform their work center responsibilities to kind of monitor and gauge where there might be some issues. We were able to assess misalignments within the 4 different interfaces below. We have a user interface, which is they reported incomplete, inaccurate, and wordy or unclear procedures. We have an IT interface, which reported that they made system updates, but these updates don't always reflect in the actual procedures that production is currently using, so they become outdated. The other interface we have is the data inputs and outputs of the interface that occurs. A lot of this information is unclear on what information is required in the system to be able to deliver an output, and then there's no data validation or verification to ensure that whatever is added to the system is actually correct and going to yield the right result for operations. And then lastly, we have a process interface, and there's a lack of ownership for this process in totality, and then there's also knowledge gaps when you have employee changeover. When we look at these user interfaces, the main issues that we were able to summarize based on everyone's inputs is really centered around missing content. We need to understand what we're doing, how we're interfacing with the system, and what is required for us to get the deliverable and the required output to perform an operation. The other areas we have is lack of experience from our users. We have employee turnover. It's very common in production. And when you have turnover, they take information with them, and if procedures are outdated, you can't really train incoming employees to the process. And then you have people that are inexperienced. So we have resources who know a lot of information, but not enough to be able to make a more robust procedural process. So our proposed solution is really just enhancing ones that have been put in place in the past. When we look at past solutions, one thing is that the procedures are considered wordy from what was put in place. There's very few images. The next solution that they put in place in the past was they actually made them work center specific, which was actually a very good change and is going to be very helpful, and we will leverage that in our proposed solution. The other change that was put in place is updates are needed by the leads. The leads were responsible for going in and making changes as needed. But today our leads are very stretched. They're being pulled in different areas of the business, and unfortunately a lot of their time is not focused or actually spent on the line producing product, so they miss information or they don't have the bandwidth to make those updates timely. So our proposed solution going forward is, one, when we look at our procedures, let's add some step-by-step instructions. The procedures today do not have enough of screen prints of the actual system and what the operator needs to execute with the direct equipment to be able to produce the product. So we want to be able to give them an image of enter information here in this screen and you will get this result, and then proceed to the next step. We really want to give them that guide. The next step is a troubleshooting appendix. Again, when I mentioned the data inputs and outputs, we need to identify what information should be in the system, and if that information is incorrect or missing, there should be an alert to a user to let them know that that is the case, so that they know how to act on that quickly, they know which department to contact, and they can have that corrected immediately. This is not something they should have to put in help desk tickets for with IT. We want to give them as much information as possible to troubleshoot a situation and make corrections on the spot. Then we also want to have a cross-functional change review board. As there's issues occurring on the line, we need immediate quick response. We need to be able to have the right team members collaborating and reviewing the issue and making those changes quickly. Our key solution really in making these proposed solutions is we need to have a single process owner that will facilitate these discussions and pull together this cross-functional change review. And we're assigning that to our manufacturing engineers, who today's process right now, that is their role. They are responsible for the production output. They're responsible for making sure that the system and equipment is running as expected and that there is no impedance to production. When we look at our implementation, we're focused on 3 areas. One, the cross-functional ownership again. When we look at implementing this process, we want to look at shared ownership representing all the work centers. So when there's a change, it's not enough to make a change just for one work center. You need to evaluate what impact that will make on any work centers upstream or downstream. So there needs to always be a cross-functional review with all the work centers that may be impacted by any change. It's not fair to assume that one person would know all of that or one work center. So we need to bring them all together. So one risk that we have in this process, and specifically for this implementation tactic, is we really need to have goals by work center. Every work center needs to refine their own metrics and make sure that their procedures are aligned with supporting those metrics. So it needs to be very centered on that, but at the same time, again, they all work together and then they share and they make a change together. The other implementation strategy we have is a process assessment and simulation. We want to have draft procedures. We want to do a live evaluation using these drafts before we actually produce them and make them active. So we want to make sure that they're working and we also want to look at any metrics to make sure that we're able to achieve those through this simulation. The challenge that we have going forward after this project is that as new issues arise, the team has to know they have to follow the same process. When you create a draft procedure, they'll need to make sure they use it with their users or use it with the process and make sure it's really going to resolve the issue before they implement it. So we also need to, with that, integrate a change control trigger that ensures the supervisors or the manufacturing engineers know that there's a problem and they quickly assess it and make those changes. The third tactic we have is developing a sustainable and repeatable process. When we're doing our implementation, we want to make sure that we walk away as a project that everything is going to continue to work. So when we look at our tactic around this strategy is employees identifying and communicating issues to the MEs. The MEs can also routinely be on the line and looking and assessing as needed to see if there are any changes, but we really are relying on the individual employees to report things right away. So with that said, our biggest challenge is going to make sure that we have the right routine monitoring that's in place, and that might just be stand-up meetings every morning with the employees, and the supervisors and MEs have those twice a week as is, and we may just be incorporating this review within those meetings. But either way, it's a team effort, and everyone is going to have to step up and communicate and be clear about what the issues are and give us a chance to get something implemented right away. When we look at our effectiveness check, it's really going to be centered around the ownership. We need ownership around who's going to be defining the metrics, measuring these metrics, and then looking at the throughput for their work center goals. Again, we're losing 4,400 units a year at over $500,000 in cost. So this is really a huge impact to the operations business unit. So we need to make sure that someone's always evaluating, reviewing where we are to make sure that we're not slipping and we're still moving forward. Procedure change is a normal course of production. It's always going to be required. If we don't quickly react and respond whenever we see the metrics going down, then as a business, we're really going to continue to be failing. When we look at our user goals, we need to really have the employee engagement. Again, we need them to communicate when they're having challenges with the job and give us an opportunity to respond. So it will be ideal to have work center metrics that can be drilled down on an employee level as well. So they are inspired and motivated by their own efficiencies, and that again will drive them to make sure that they can execute their jobs efficiently. When we look at competency training, that's another area of improvement that we can make. The supervisors can routinely review the competency of the employees to make sure that they're on track. We want everyone to be successful. So evaluate each employee on a routine basis and see how they're doing. See what changes they may need. See what training they might need. And if you have any employee turnover happening, this is also one way that you can stay on top of that. You know, you get away from having tribal knowledge, and you have more employees that are speaking up, and you're documenting what they know and making that information translated into the procedures. The other effectiveness check we're going to have is understanding the changes that are happening and monitoring those changes. We want to evaluate any changes that are resulting in inaccurate or incomplete information. Those are really alerts for us. You should not have significant number of changes because you're missing information. Then that means that there's definitely a breakdown, unless there's a system change, equipment change, product change, something was not translated into procedures like they should have been, and we were executing protocols for production to produce units without that instruction. We need to have that information in before we produce the product or implement any changes. So the other thing we want to do is look at trend reporting. So we look at the help desk tickets. What kind of information is being reported as an issue? Again, if the procedures are updated timely and changes are not happening without these procedure changes, you really shouldn't have a large number. You shouldn't have any IT help desk tickets saying something's not working unless the server is down or there's something else that just happens in a normal course of business. But it should never be because an operator doesn't have an instruction or change is put in place without giving that operator instruction. So our next steps for implementing this project, we need to inform this cross-functional team and then begin initiating these changes. Right now we're looking at about 4 hours per week dedicated between October 16th through November 15th to finalize these draft procedures. The resources that we need is IT. Again, we want to look at the process, look at the system, look at the procedures, and they can help us fill in any gaps, and also help us identify what the data inputs and outputs are so we can have those documented as well. We will also want the unit supervisors engaged in this process. We will want the MEs that will be responsible for owning it going forward and help with how we develop the procedures as far as the format and the content and the visual usability of the procedure. And then quality engineers